Hi there, I'm Angela. Welcome to Vlogmas Day 21. If you're a regular here and you're wondering where are days 1 through 20, allow me to fill you in. So this year I'm participating in just a very small way with Sherry over at Granny's Sewing Room in her Vlogmas. So she's doing an advent calendar every day this month, or at least through Christmas, and she has invited some of the other vloggers to participate. So that means that every day she's doing a video regarding some sort of holiday related make, whether it's something that you sew or craft or cook, and several of us are helping her out with that. So I'm really excited to participate. And if you are here because Sherry sent you over, I'm so happy to have you here. Welcome, and I hope that you enjoyed today's video. You may have noticed that I'm not in my typical location today, which is my sewing room. That's because what I'm doing for Sherry's Advent calendar is baking some holiday cookies. So every year at our household, we do what we call Cookie Day. That's where we bake maybe 5, 6 different types of cookies, like all day long. That's all we're doing is baking cookies. And then we use those, what we don't eat in our own family, which is very small, we give to our friends and places that we do business with. So we're giving like a lot of cookies away. For me, the joy of it is just the whole process, the baking. And a lot of years, in recent years at least, we've done an open house on Cookie Day where we've invited friends and family to kind of drop by, have some eggnog or other holiday cheer, sample the cookies, and then they get to take cookies home with them. This year that seemed like a little much, and that's due to like a couple of different things. Like I feel like I'm still recovering from our big Thanksgiving, and we have our puppy Farley, and he's like always underfoot. So we decided to just kind of keep this low key this year. So what I'm going to share with you guys today is how I make my very favorite cookie. And as I mentioned, we do several different types of cookies, and they're all really good. But over the years, like I've been making this recipe since 2016, and every year since then, and it's by far my favorite cookie now. And so I'm going to share with you guys how I make that, and I hope that that'll be interesting for you. So before we jump right in, a couple of things to let you guys know about. One is this is not my recipe. It is from one of my favorite cookbooks, The Joy of Vegan Baking by Colleen Patrick Goudreau. I'll put a link to that book below. And I have modified it a little bit over the years, but it's still really similar to like the original recipe from the book. And the second thing is that I've already measured out pretty much everything, and it's laid out on our little island here because I didn't think you guys wanted to spend your time watching me weigh and measure everything. So I got that out of the way first, and I have to say that this is not usually how I cook or bake anything, and I kind of like it. Let me move this so you can kind of see everything here. It's really nice having everything all set up and ready to go. So with that, let's get to making these cookies. Oh, and one more thing, even though I've been making these cookies for a few years now, I never can remember the recipe. Like I can never remember any recipes, no matter how many times I've made something. So I do have the recipe here, and I'll be referring to it. So if you see me looking down, I'm just looking at the recipe. So let's do it. So first of all, we want to preheat our oven to 350 Fahrenheit. And we are lucky here that we have a double oven. They're not like 2 full-sized ovens that are kind of built into the wall. It's just one standalone unit that has a small oven on the top and then a bigger oven on the bottom. So that really comes in handy like during big holidays when you're making all kinds of dishes and cycling things in and out of the oven. And it really comes in handy for Cookie Day because I can keep those trays swapping, moving in and out when I'm like baking cookies all day long. Okay, so we have our oven preheated, and one thing that I want to point out, so you heard me mention the title of the book, it's The Joy of Vegan Baking. I am primarily vegan. Every now and then I'll veer off, but I usually try to stay vegan or plant-based. And so this recipe calls for an egg replacer, and you can do that a couple of different ways. The recipe called for using a flaxseed mixture, like ground flax seeds you mix with water to make like a paste, and that's the binding agent. I use this energy egg replacer for most of the things that I bake or cook that need eggs, and it usually does a really good job. So I am going to, I've already got my, this is the energy egg replacer mixture, and I'm pretty sure it's nothing crazy. It's just like tapioca based, so it's not like something weird or anything. And I'm going to mix that with some warm water. And let me get a little spoon. And it doesn't take long for this to kind of thicken and blend all into the water. And this is not something, I don't think that you could do like this step ahead of time, or it might start like drying or getting too solidified. So that's why I did not have this made up ahead of time. Also, if you were doing this using the flaxseed, I think that I've done flaxseed a couple of times for various things, and maybe I was doing it wrong, but I didn't have incredibly good success doing that. And with that, you do have to let it sit for a little while, like 15 or 30 minutes for it to kind of do its thing, so to speak. But the energy egg replacer works out pretty quickly. It's just, you know, a powder that you mix into the warm water. Okay, so that's pretty good and mixed up now. So the next step is in a large bowl. So we will be using 2 bowls for this recipe. One is larger than the other. This is my largest size bowl right here. I've had these forever. In fact, I think that these were my husband's when we got married, like a long time ago. So with the wet ingredients, so we're going to cream the butter and the sugars, I use the larger bowl, and then we will later mix the dry ingredients up in the smaller bowl, and then they get mixed all together. So we are going to cream together the butter, sugars, vanilla, and the egg mixture. And regarding the butters, so in order to keep these cookies vegan, and most everything that we use that needs butter, whether it's putting butter on our toast or cooking with butter, we usually use Earth Balance. It's readily available at pretty much any regular grocery store. And I have had these sitting out for a couple of hours now because they need to be softened. So it is 1 cup of non-dairy butter softened, 1.5 cups of brown sugar. And like I mentioned, you can use light or dark. I'm using light because that's what we bought. A 1/4 cup of just regular granulated sugar. 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. And vanilla is one of those things that I usually splurge and get like the real vanilla extract rather than the imitation. I'm not sure, you know, if it makes a huge difference, but it seems like many years ago I found that I saw a little bit of a difference using the pure vanilla extract, so that's what I typically use. And then we'll add in our egg replacer. And once we have all that mixed in, let me go over that again in case I didn't say the quantities. So I've got egg replacer enough to replace 2 eggs. I've got 1 cup of non-dairy butter softened, 1.5 cups of brown sugar firmly packed, and 1/4 cup of granulated sugar, and 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. So then what we do is to cream these, and for that I use this is just like an electric hand mixer, so I will do that, and I'll kind of speed that part up so you guys don't have to listen to it. Okay, so I've got that all mixed up, and it's just like you would expect, just like a creamy mixture. And we're going to set this aside for now and start mixing up our dry ingredients. So in the separate bowl, we are going to combine the flour, and that's 1.75 cups of all-purpose. And interestingly, this recipe calls for oat bran, just 1/2 cup. So that's something that like most of us may not have readily on hand at all times. So I actually my husband went out and get this because we don't usually keep oat bran on hand. So it calls for 1/2 cup of oat bran. And I'm thinking that maybe what the oat bran does for the cookies is to add texture to it. These cookies have a wonderful texture. They're so good. And then next we add in 3/4 teaspoon of baking soda and 3/4 teaspoon of baking powder, which I have already pre-measured into this little cup. And then 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, and 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg, which I've pre-measured together. Put all 3 of those in this little cup. And I am going to just whisk these together. So we need to get these combined really well. Good. And then we add this to the butter mixture. So bring that guy back in and mix until it's blended and smooth. And I remember, and I've made a note in my recipe here, that this batter gets to be pretty thick. And some years, you know how things, you do something the same way every time, but it turns out differently for some reason. It's kind of like that with gardening too. You do the same thing every year, but you get a better tomato crop or whatever one year to the next. It's a little more consistent with cooking, I think, than gardening, but somehow there's always little variations that throw things. So, but anyway, I remember this mixture getting to be pretty thick. And by the time we add in the oats and the walnuts and the raisins, it's really thick. And I think at times I've had to actually take my rings off, wash my hands, and just get in there with my hands to get it all mixed up. So while I'm mixing this up, let me know in the comments what your all's favorite cookie is. Do you have a favorite, or do you bake Christmas cookies or any holiday cookies or at any other time of the year? I remember one year my brother made these sugar cookies, the kind that you just roll out and you can cut into shapes. And I'm typically not like a sugar cookie fan, but these were so good. I actually begged him to give me the recipe for them. and they just had like a nice like buttery flavor to them. And he gave me the recipe because he's like a generous guy and he's not going to be like, no, you can't have it. So he did give me the recipe, and I was glad about that. But I haven't made those like in a long time. I mean, that was years ago, and it's been a while. I think of myself as like too lazy of a cook or a baker to go to the trouble of rolling out the batter and cutting the shapes. And I know his kids were little when they did that, so that's probably why he did that, just so they could have the fun of doing like the whole cookie cutter process. All right, so we have got our batter pretty well blended, and I'm going to bring this in a little bit closer so you guys can see the texture. I hope it's good enough lighting. So it's pretty thick, and we have yet to add like the chunky ingredients. So next we stir in the oats, and that is 3 cups of rolled oats. That's a lot of oats. And 1 cup of raisins and 1 cup of walnuts. Whenever I'm making anything with nuts that have to be chopped, I had a Pampered Chef food chopper, the kind that is like cylindrical, and then you press down on it to make it chop whatever, carrots, nuts, onions, whatever. And this year, a couple weeks ago, when we were making something for Thanksgiving, it broke. So what I did was just to buy walnut pieces instead of like whole walnuts, and I think that they might be too large for cookies. I don't know if you guys can see that. They're pretty chunky, but I'm gonna go for it. Hopefully it'll work out. So this is where it gets, yeah. Where it gets a little more manual labor and hands-on, I guess is what I was thinking and couldn't come up with the words. So I'm just going to go ahead and dump all the oats in and see how far I can get, stirring them with the spoon before I have to roll up my sleeves. So I wouldn't say that I have it completely blended in yet, but it's blended pretty well enough for now. So I'm going to go ahead and add the nuts and the raisins. I am finding that I can do it pretty well with the wooden spoon, but I think it would be a lot more effective to just get in there and kind of knead it with my hands. So give me one moment. I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back. Okay, I've got it all mixed up, and I'm going to bring this back over. I'm going to bring this back over to you guys and show you what batter looks like now. It is chunky. So next we will spoon these out onto our baking sheet. And I mentioned that my food chopper that broke was from Pampered Chef. Years ago, like in my 20s, when I first was out on my own and learning how to cook and everything, I loved Pampered Chef. And I had hosted at least 1, maybe 2 Pampered Chef parties, and I found that the quality of their stuff was so good. I mean, hence I used that same food chopper for 25 years or close to it before it finally went kaput. I think the part of the plastic on it just finally cracked. And I do have some of their baking stones, so that is always what I use to bake cookies, because I found that they bake so nicely, like evenly, like the bottoms don't get burnt, the middles get done. And when I used to bake on a metal baking sheet, what I would find is that oftentimes the bottom would burn, but the center would still be kind of gooey. So those baking stones like were a lifesaver. They were game changing for me as far as baking. And I still have my same, I'm not sure if you guys can see on the stove there, I still have my 2 same baking stones from like 25 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. Knock on wood, I don't want those to break. Anyway, so that's what I use. And so the recipe calls for dropping the batter by tablespoonsful onto your baking sheet. And years ago, I found a real secret to getting consistently shaped and sized cookies. This is also another Pampered Chef item. It's one of their scoopers. I think this one is like marketed as a melon baller. That's showing up. And I found that this is perfect for getting perfectly sized cookies. So this is what I use for my cookies every year, anytime I bake cookies. So I am going to work on that now. Actually, I can bring the baking sheet here, still look at you guys while I do that. Clear a little bit of my mess up. And to the point now where I don't need to look at the recipe. I've never ever been able to remember a recipe. I'm kind of a little bit envious of, for instance, my mother-in-law, who is one of like the world's best cooks. I'm convinced of it. She like doesn't even need to look at recipes, whether she's made something once or 100 times. I guess it just locks into her brain, and that's if she even uses a recipe. She's such a good cook. Me, I rely on the recipes. So let me finish cleaning my workstation here. And I am having a little Christmas cheer. Oh, by the way, if you guys are interested, so I used to, what was that? I've always liked a little bit of eggnog at Christmas time, like many years, like for decades. But then when I switched over to plant-based or vegan, I'm trying to really not have dairy as much as possible. So I've tried over the years a few of the different kinds of like almond nog, and they were okay, but they just never kind of had that same richness or creaminess of actual eggnog. But this year, we are trying almond breeze, almond milk nog. And I think this is the first time I've tried this brand, and it's really good as far as the thickness. I mean, it's not going to be the exact same as eggnog made with eggs, but it's pretty good. So I'm having a little bit of that. And the way that I like to do cookies, so this recipe, let me back up. This recipe will make like somewhere between 80 and 90 cookies. So the trays are going to be coming in, coming out, going in. It'll be like a cycle. So what I'll do is to get this first baking sheet loaded, put it in, get the second baking sheet loaded, and then I'll wait a few minutes before putting that one in so they're not both done at the same time. And having the 2 ovens is so helpful with this because I can keep both of those in use. And if you are just using one oven, you can still just keep cycling them in and out, and it'll work just fine. So the way this very handy scooper works, you just scoop it into your dough. I hope that's showing up. I realize I'm kind of far away, but putting the camera so far away was the only way I could get you guys to be able to see like everything going on. So, but you just get a little scoop of the dough there and put it onto your whatever type of baking sheet you're using. And I usually, with some cookies, like especially ones where the dough or the batter is so thick, press it down just a little bit. these cookies don't spread too much. This dough doesn't spread too much, so I can put them on the baking sheet pretty close together, which is really helpful when you have this many cookies to bake. You can do more at one time. And since I know my hands are clean, I'm just kind of gently patting those down. Okay, so I was able to get 15 onto my round baking stone here. And I have in my notes from this recipe that 14 minutes is the optimal time for, just because I've been baking these since 2016. So I know that that's the perfect time. Even though, having said that, I will still put these in the oven and set my timer for 13 minutes just in case, and then I'll check them. And I apologize, but I cannot remember what the timing was on the original recipe. While these are baking, I'll look that up and let you guys know. And one other thing I want to share with you guys. Do you guys use these UV gloves? We've been using these here at our house for years, and they are the best things. We don't even use like a typical, insulated pot holder anymore, just because these are the best. So just a little tip in case you were interested in that, and you might find that helpful. So while those are baking, I'm going to go ahead and load up my other baking stone. This one, the other one was circular, this one's a rectangle. We also use baking stones to make pizza on for the same reasons, that it turns out so beautifully every time and nothing burns, provided you don't leave it in the oven too long. Once I get to a good stopping point, I'll kind of give you a little rundown of all the other cookies that I'm planning to make for Cookie Day this year. And there's so many. I have like really high ambitions this year, and I'm thinking that Cookie Day might have to turn into Cookie Weekend in order for me to get these all done. So the day I'm filming this, it's December 12th, and that gives me plenty of time to bake all the cookies I want to give out as gifts. You guys aren't seeing this until December 21st at the earliest, if you're watching it on the day that it's coming out. So I'm thinking that probably I might also be baking cookies tomorrow, which is fine. I did not have to work this weekend, so I have plenty of time to do this. And normally I have my hubby, who's like a willing helper, and he loves being like the taste tester. But because this year we have our Farley puppy who's 60 pounds of craziness, lovable craziness. They are in hubby's office right now with the door closed just because it could get a little chaotic, and I want you guys to be able to hear the instructions. All right, so I have this one ready to go, and my other pan has been in there for about 4 minutes, give or take. So that's enough time for me to go ahead and get this one going on the bottom. And I'm seriously hoping that there's no pots and pans or anything that we left in the bottom oven, like the big oven. We'll see. I don't guess it would hurt anything. I would just, you know, have to make sure I pull them out using my UV gloves. One thing about this oven, the bottom drawer kind of sticks a little bit. I don't know if you saw me kind of have to struggle with it. We've had this unit since 2005. That's the year that we got married, and whoops, I do have something in there. All right, set that right there. So now I've got both trays in, and I'm just waiting for the first tray to get done. I'm going to put you guys on pause for a moment and look up that recipe to see what the original baking time is. I'll be right back. Okay, so 12 to 15 minutes, and it's one of those, like any kind of baking typical, where you have to just get a feel for how long it takes your particular oven to bake them. And it says bake until they're golden brown. And then once you pull them from the oven, you allow them to firm up for a few minutes while they're still on the cookie sheet. And after they've sat on the cookie sheet for just a little bit, I scoop them out with a spatula onto a cooling rack. This is another, I think this is Pampered Chef too. I feel like in my 20s I kind of furnished my whole kitchen with Pampered Chef things, not everything, but to a certain degree, and I'm still using those same pieces like 20 plus years later. So this is not to sound like a Pampered Chef commercial. I'm not affiliated in any way. I've just had I enjoy their products and had good success with them. So we still have a few minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and put you on pause again. And once that first tray comes out, I will be back. So I've just pulled our first tray of cookies out. And you remember what I said about how you do everything the same every year, and sometimes things turn out a little different. I actually left these in for 15 minutes because they just seemed like they were a little too mushy inside. So I will let them cool for a couple minutes on the tray and then move them over to the cooling rack. And I'm wondering, like, what makes the difference? Is it air pressure, or is our oven starting to slow down a little bit over all these years? I don't know. So the bottom tray is still in. And yeah, so I'll just let those cookies rest for about a minute, maybe two. With these particular cookies, I have found that it's not as critical to let them sit on the hot tray before moving them to the cooling rack. just because they are very, like they're a solid, firm cookie. So I can scoop them out with my spatula and they don't like ooze or shift around the way some cookies do if you don't let them firm up a little bit. So they don't need to sit there too long before I can move them to the cooling rack. I'm going to give one a test now. And I just use a regular, ordinary metal spatula. Grab one of my gloves. I mean, they're still soft, but they're not going to fall apart if I gently get the spatula under them. So I'm going to bring this first one over to show you guys. Yeah, and it does still, I could tell that it was a little soft inside. So I'm going to let the whole batch just cool on the cooling rack. So as you saw, I just pulled the second batch out and let those sit while I load up the first tray with new cookies. And while I'm doing this, I thought you might find it helpful if I show you a comparison. So this is the cookie ball that goes on to get baked, and this is the cookie finished. Those are showing up for you. So they really don't, spread out too much at all, which is why I can load up the trays with as many as I can. All right, time for tray number 1 to go back in for its second round. And by now, I can go ahead and pull the cookies on tray number 2 off onto the cooling rack. And I can fill tray 2 up, more cookies to go in. And once you get like a good rhythm going, you can really keep these cycling pretty good. Like I mentioned, even if you just have like the one oven, you can still keep the trays cycling. That's how I, used to do it before we got this oven. And I would say too, if you are in the market for a new range or oven, stove, or whichever you call it, and you like to cook and bake, I'd say check into, don't put it off the table to maybe look at one with the 2 ovens. It is so useful, even though this top oven's pretty small. For everyday cooking, that if we have to use an oven, we really only use our top oven because it heats up, and because it's like shallow, it heats up a lot quicker. So if we're baking just something for dinner that night, we don't even bother heating, the bigger oven on the bottom up. In fact, the only time that the bottom oven ever gets used is if we're doing a big holiday gathering where we're baking a lot, such as Thanksgiving or on cookie day. Other than that, it just pretty much sits empty and unused. Maybe not empty, because we do, as you saw, put other cookware in there just for storage. So I got the second tray in for the second round, and funnily enough, I feel like I should have spaced these out a little bit more judiciously, because I have just enough batter for maybe 4 or 5 cookies. So I'll have to do another run with tray number 1, which is a few cookies, which that's fine. It's okay. So I'm going to pause while they're baking, and I'll be back in just a second. So I've just pulled tray number 1 on its second round out. If you're keeping up with all that, it's the 3rd tray bake in all. So they're cooling for a minute or 2 on the oven, and I thought if you guys are interested, it might be fun just to tell you all the cookies that I'm making this year. So I've got the oatmeal raisin, which we are doing today together, and snickerdoodles, which I'm not a huge fan of, but hubby loves them, so I'm very happy to make those for him. Chocolate chip, peanut butter oatmeal, and maple nuts. And those are all kind of my tried and trues. And then the 4 new ones that I'm making this year are spicy Mexican hot chocolate cookies. That sounds good. Mocha cappuccino, PB&J thumbprints, and sunflower cookies. So I am really excited to try these new ones. So this is kind of the main reason I think Cookie Day is going to turn into Cookie Weekend, because I want to do our favorites, but then also I want to try some new ones too. So it just kind of keeps getting bigger and bigger. Yes, I'm going to go ahead and get these that just came out onto the cooling rack. And I did have to pull out my other cooling rack. So these are made to kind of stack. I don't know if you can see that far away, but I've got two layers now. So I'm going to do that now. And it turns out I had enough just to make 6 more cookies. So I'm loading those up now. Get those in. And I guess that's about it. I've just got these to cool and the other like lonely little 6 cookies in the top oven. And I am going to try. So I've been so good so far. I haven't even taste tested any of them, and that's hard to do. These are my favorite cookies. But I do have a couple of more things to share with you guys before we close it out. So if you've made it this far, thank you so much for sticking with me. This has been kind of a fun video for me. It's definitely like outside of my wheelhouse. I usually, if you're a regular here, you know that I do sewing videos and not cooking videos. So it's been fun to do that. But now for the best part, Sherry over at Granny's Sewing Room is doing giveaways. So all through Vlogmas and her advent calendar, she's doing giveaways for the viewers. So if you would like to be in the running for a prize for Sherry's advent calendar, what you'll need to do for this video, the prize that's kind of associated with this particular video, just leave a comment somewhere in this video below, and just use the word Christmas somewhere in your comment. Even if it's just the word Christmas, it's fine. Just leave a comment using the word Christmas, and make sure that you leave your comment by noon Eastern Standard Time on December 24th. It's Christmas Eve, noon Eastern Standard Time. And then there will be a random drawing of all of you guys who left comments with the word Christmas in them. And what I'll do on Christmas Eve night is to do a random drawing using a random number picker. And I will post in my community page which of you guys is the winner for this video's advent calendar prize. So I'll just need you to, at that point, I think I would just need you to provide me your email address that I can forward to Sherry, and then she kind of takes it from there as far as making arrangements to get your prize to you. So if you want to participate, just leave a comment using the word Christmas once again, by noon on December 24th. That's noon Eastern Standard Time. And that's pretty much all I have for you guys, except for taste testing the cookie. I'll be right back. I'm going to bring one over, show you guys close up. So this is one of the first ones that came out, and I'll just show you guys what it looks like. I hope that the lighting's good. Yeah. So they're not huge, good little size. And they sort of have that nice, like, crispy, chewy mixture, which is one of the things that I love about these. It's so good. My favorite cookie. And before I go, one more time, These came from the book, The Joy of Vegan Baking. And I did add a couple of modifications, but they're pretty close to the original recipe. I'll put a link to this book below on Amazon. It's not an affiliate link. I don't have Amazon affiliate program, but just in case you're interested. I love the author of this book is Colleen Patrick Goudreau. I have several of her cookbooks. Love them. So good. And that is all that I have, and I'm pretty sure, so this video will air on December 21st, so that gives you a few days to leave a comment. And this probably will be the last video that you see from me before Christmas. So if I don't talk to you again before then, I hope that you have a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, and I will be back soon. Thanks so much for watching.